Welcome to English with Zenko Master. Get ready to learn something new today.
My name is Julia Hammond. I am 32 years old. I live in Leeds, England. This morning, I wiped the kitchen counter, replied to 2 client emails, and folded a load of clean towels. I also watched a woman I barely knew pick up broken glass from my living room floor with shaking hands. Her name was Marta. She came to clean my house twice a week. I had never thought about her much. She came in, cleaned, and left. But today, she dropped a vase I had never seen before. And inside that vase were photographs. Old ones. Black and white. The kind people hide for a reason. The first picture that fell out showed 2 children sitting on a suitcase. Their faces were small, serious, and still. A woman stood behind them in the doorway, her arm raised as if waving goodbye. When Marta saw the photo, her face turned pale. She bent down, reached quickly for it, but I picked it up before she could. "Who are they?" I asked. She didn't answer. She just stared at the picture like it was something dangerous. The vase had broken into large pieces, some still wet with water. I noticed petals too, dried ones. Someone had placed flowers in it long ago. But I had lived in this flat for 4 years. I had never seen that vase before, not once. I didn't keep old vases behind sofas. Marta said it must have fallen during cleaning, but I hadn't heard a crash. And when I walked into the room, she wasn't holding a cloth or a broom. She was holding the vase. That's when it slipped from her fingers. That's when I saw something shift in her eyes. I didn't push her. I didn't accuse her. I just helped her clean up the mess. But all afternoon, I felt cold. Not from fear. From knowing, suddenly, that someone had been living a second life right under my nose. In my own house. Later that day, I sat at the kitchen table with the photo in my hand. She hadn't taken it. It must have stuck to the bottom of my shoe. The picture had words on the back, written in blue ink, faded with age. I couldn't read them. It looked like Polish. I stared at the children's faces. They didn't look like strangers. In fact, something about the older child reminded me of Marta's smile. I opened my laptop and searched the cleaning agency's website. Her profile was still there. Marta Z, available Tuesdays and Thursdays, experienced, speaks limited English. That was it. No last name. No address. No phone number. That night I could not sleep. I kept imagining the photographs, where they had come from, how long they had been in that vase, and why someone would hide them behind a sofa. I also kept seeing Marta's face, the fear, the panic, the way she avoided my eyes after the vase broke. The next morning, I texted the agency. I asked if Marta was coming again that week. No reply. I called. The number went straight to voicemail. I waited a day. Then another. On Friday, I walked to the agency myself. It was a small office above a shop. A tired woman in glasses met me at the desk. "I'm looking for Marta," I said. "She cleans my flat twice a week. She didn't come yesterday. The woman frowned. Marta? She left. About 4 days ago. Left? She quit. Sent us a message and didn't come back. Said she was going to another city. Which city? The woman shrugged. Didn't say. Just that she wouldn't be returning. I stood there, stunned. Did she leave a forwarding address? Any contact details? No, the woman said. She was always private, quiet type. I walked home slowly, my head full of questions. That night, I took out the photograph again. I wanted to forget it, to put it away. But instead, I opened my laptop and searched again, this time for old Polish names, uniforms, anything that might explain what I had seen. One search led to another. Soon, I was reading about a neighborhood in Poland where families had been separated during a crisis in the late 1980s. There were stories about women forced to leave home, children raised in silence, and photographs buried under floorboards. My heart began to race. I didn't know why it mattered, but it did. By Sunday, I had gone through every drawer in the living room. And that's when I found it. A small notebook, pressed flat between books on a bottom shelf. I hadn't put it there. It was brown, worn, and written in 2 languages, Polish and something that looked like German. Inside were lists, names, addresses, and a few pages of handwriting that looked rushed. One name appeared more than once. Karol Z. I opened the envelope where I had kept the photograph. On the back of it, the name Carol was written in the same handwriting. I stared at the notebook in my lap. Who was Carol? Marta's father? Her husband? Her child? The entries in the notebook were dated from the 1970s. I felt a chill as I read one short note written in shaky handwriting. If I do not return, please remember the red door. Under the stone. Don't be afraid. Red door? I walked to the back of my flat. The door to the small garden shed was painted red. I had painted it last summer. It had been blue before that. I didn't know what color it was when I moved in. I had never asked. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the message, the red door, the photographs, Marta's pale face. Why would she come to clean houses in England? What was she really looking for? The next morning, I stepped outside and went to the shed. The garden was quiet. I looked around and found a stone near the edge, slightly bigger than the rest. It didn't look special, but when I moved it, I found something underneath. A tiny rusted key wrapped in cloth. I held it in my hand for a long time. What had I uncovered? And who had been here before me? Before I share the rest of my story, could you please tell me where you're from? It gives me strength to know there's someone out there who listens to me, who understands me. It means a lot to me. I held the tiny key in my hand for a long time. The cloth around it was damp, and it smelled of earth and rust. The key was old, much older than anything I kept in the shed. I stared at the red door behind me, then back at the stone I had moved. Someone had hidden this years ago, maybe decades. and I had walked over it without knowing, week after week. Back inside, I placed the key on the table beside Marta's photograph. I wanted to believe there was an explanation, something simple, but everything about this felt heavy. I thought about calling the police or even the landlord, but what would I say? "Hi, there's a cleaner who vanished and left me a bunch of old photos and a secret key." It sounded ridiculous. Instead, I sat with the notebook again. I flipped through the last few pages, hoping for something more. There were no full sentences, just dates and short phrases. Some were crossed out. One read, "Safe in England." Another simply said, "Find Julia." That one made my heart stop. Why my name? It could have been another Julia. Or maybe it was someone else's writing entirely. Still, I kept turning the words around in my mind. I didn't feel safe anymore. I felt like I had entered a story that didn't belong to me, but I was already inside it. That night, I lay in bed and listened to every sound. The wind outside, the creak of my pipes, even the distant bark of a dog 2 streets over. I couldn't stop thinking about Marta. Where was she now? Why had she run? Or was someone chasing her? The next morning, I couldn't focus on anything. My inbox was full. Clients were waiting for updates, but I couldn't open a single email. I kept looking at the key. Finally, I put on a coat and went back to the shed. I opened the red door and stepped inside. It smelled of wood and dust. I checked the shelves first. Tools, plant pots, old garden gloves. Then I looked at the floor. There were 5 wooden planks near the far wall that didn't match the others. They looked newer. Maybe someone had replaced them. I pressed down on them. One of the planks gave a little. I knelt and pulled at it. After a few tries, it lifted. Beneath it was a small wooden box, the size of a loaf of bread. I picked it up and brought it inside. It was locked, of course. I used the tiny key, and it clicked open with a quiet sigh of metal. Inside, there were more photographs. Dozens. Some were black and white, others faded color. All of them showed people I didn't recognize. Families, children, a few older men in suits. At the bottom of the box was a piece of folded paper. When I opened it, I found a letter. It was handwritten in English, in large, careful letters. It began with, "To whoever finds this." I read the letter twice. Then I read it again. It was from a woman named Danuta. She had lived in this flat in the 1980s. She had come from Warsaw, Poland, after her husband died in an accident. She didn't explain much, only that she had fled with her daughter, Marta. They had changed their names. She worked as a cleaner and kept her head down. The letter spoke of someone following them, watching the house. She said she didn't know how long they could stay. At the end of the letter, she wrote, "If my daughter ever returns here, please protect her. Her name is Marta. She carries the truth." I sat frozen for a long time. So it was her. Marta wasn't just someone sent from an agency. She had lived here, years before me. She had hidden that box herself, or maybe her mother had, and she had come back, not to clean, to find it. But why run again? I wanted answers. I needed them. So I did something I wasn't proud of. I emailed the cleaning agency again, pretending I wanted to hire Marta privately. I said I had urgent work and hoped she was still available. I even said I would pay extra. 2 days later, I got a reply. It wasn't from the agency. It was from a private email account. Meet me, Tuesday, 11 a.m., back of King's Library. No name, no details, just that. I almost didn't go. It felt reckless, but something told me I had to. On Tuesday morning, I dressed simply, tied my hair back, and took the letter and the photograph with me. The King's Library was 20 minutes away by foot. I walked through the side streets and tried to calm my nerves. The back of the library was quiet. A narrow alley with old brick walls and a view of the river. I waited. I didn't know who I was expecting. Marta? Someone else? Then I saw her. She stepped out from behind a tree, wearing a gray coat and a knitted hat. Her hair was tucked up, but I recognized her face instantly. Marta, I whispered. She walked slowly toward me. Her eyes looked tired. You came, she said. I nodded. I found the box. For a moment she didn't speak. Then she sat down on the low wall near the water. I didn't know if I'd have the courage to reach out, she said. But I needed to know if it was still there. I needed to know if you had found it. I did, I said. And the letter. And the photos. She smiled sadly. I was 5 when we left Poland. My mother never told me everything. Only pieces. She said we had to change names. That someone dangerous was looking for her. I didn't believe her. Not really. Until she died. I'm sorry, I said gently. She died in a care home in Sheffield. She had kept the notebook, the key, everything. After she passed, I felt like I had to understand. So I came back to Leeds. I found your address through the agency. I thought maybe the box was still there. Why didn't you tell me? I didn't think you'd believe me, she said, and I was afraid someone was still watching. My mother said it wasn't safe to talk to anyone. Ever. She looked down at her hands. There's something else, she added. The man in the photo, the one in uniform, his name was Carol. He was my mother's brother. He worked for the government back then. He disappeared in 1987. She believed he was killed because of what he knew. What did he know? I asked. I don't know, she said. But she believed the photos were part of it. Proof of something. Something that people wanted hidden. I handed her the photograph I had brought. She took it with both hands, carefully, like it might fall apart. Then she started to cry. I never got to ask her the questions that matter, she said. We sat in silence for a long time. The river moved slowly beside us. "What will you do now?" I asked. "I don't know," she said, "but I think I need to leave again. Maybe go back to Warsaw. Try to trace my uncle, or at least understand the story she never finished." I reached into my bag and gave her the notebook and the rest of the photographs. She took them without a word. "I'm sorry I disappeared," she said at last. "And thank you for being kind, for not throwing it all away." "I almost did," I admitted. "But something told me it meant more." She smiled. "It did. It still does." Then she stood. I watched her walk back down the alley and disappear behind the trees. I don't know where she went. I don't know if I'll ever see her again. But that night, when I sat in my flat and looked at the empty shelf where the vase had once been, I felt something different. Not fear, not sadness, a strange kind of peace. Because sometimes, even a stranger's secret can help you see the truth in your own life. The rooms you thought you knew, the corners you never looked at, and the people who pass quietly through them, carrying entire lives on their backs. After Marta left, the flat felt different. Not colder exactly, but quieter, in a deeper way. It was as if something that had been hidden for years had finally moved through it and gone. I spent the rest of the week putting things back in order, but I found myself stopping often. I'd stare at the bookshelf, the floor near the sofa, the corner by the shed door. These weren't just parts of my home anymore. They were places where another woman had once lived, hidden and remembered. I didn't tell anyone about Marta. Not my friends, not the cleaning agency, not even my sister when she visited. I wanted to hold that story close, like it still belonged partly to me. I didn't need to explain it. I just wanted to carry it quietly, the way Marta had carried that key all her life. A few weeks later, a letter arrived. There was no return address, only a foreign stamp. Inside was a small note in careful handwriting. "Thank you for giving my mother's truth a place to rest, M." With it was a photo, one I hadn't seen before. It showed Marta and her mother standing outside my flat many years ago. The walls were a different color, the windows older, but it was the same place. Marta looked about 5, wearing a thick coat and holding a red balloon. I kept that photo in a drawer, not because I wanted to forget it, but because it already lived in my mind, and I didn't want it to fade. Time passed. Spring arrived with its soft winds and early morning light. My days filled up again. Work became busy. I cleaned my own flat now. Not because I had to, but because it gave me time to think, to slow down, to notice what was around me. I found myself remembering Marta in small, quiet ways. When I made tea, I remembered how she always dried the mugs carefully. When I folded the blankets on the sofa, I thought of how she always placed them perfectly. I had never really paid attention before, but now every action felt full of something else, someone else. One day, I opened the notebook again. I hadn't touched it since I gave Marta the original. This was a copy I made, just in case. I read the entries slowly, this time not looking for answers, but just listening. One page caught my attention. It said, "There is truth in silence and safety in kindness." I read that line again and again. I had never thought of myself as brave. I wasn't the kind of person who chased danger or searched for hidden things. But when the moment came, I didn't run from it. I stayed. I listened. I helped. Maybe that's a kind of courage, too. A month later, I decided to take a short trip. I booked a train to York, a city not far from Leeds. I wanted to walk through the narrow lanes, visit the old bookshops, and feel like someone else for a little while. Not Julia Hammond, the freelance copywriter. Just Julia. A woman with a secret story in her heart. The trip was quiet, peaceful. On the last afternoon, I sat in a cafe by the river, sipping tea and watching people pass. A group of teenagers laughed loudly. An old couple fed birds. Everyone had their lives, their stories. I wondered how many of them were carrying secrets. How many had something they could never explain? When I returned home, I felt lighter, not because I had left anything behind, but because I had carried something important with me and still moved forward. That was the part I hadn't understood before. Stories don't stay frozen. They change. And so do we. One Saturday morning, while cleaning out the storage cupboard, I found a small wooden box I didn't recognize. My first thought was panic. Another secret? Another past I didn't know? But when I opened it, I smiled. It was a gift from my sister. A set of handmade candles with lavender scent. I had forgotten all about them. I laughed at myself. How quickly I had become someone who expected mystery around every corner. I lit one of the candles and let the room fill with calm air. That afternoon, I sat on the back step and watched the garden. The red door of the shed was still there, slightly chipped now from the wind and rain. I thought about painting it again. Maybe white this time. Or maybe I would leave it red. Let it stand as it was, like a memory I could touch. I never heard from Marta again. No emails, no phone calls. But I didn't expect to. She had found what she was looking for. Her story had opened, turned, and ended in its own quiet way. And I was only a page in that book. Sometimes I imagined her walking down a street in Warsaw, holding that notebook in her hands, reading her mother's handwriting under a different sky. I hoped she found peace. I hoped she knew someone had listened. One evening, I was invited to a neighbor's dinner party. I almost didn't go. I didn't feel like making small talk or pretending to care about someone's kitchen renovation. But something told me to go anyway. We sat at a long table filled with food and candles. I didn't talk much, but I listened. One woman across the table spoke about her parents, how they had come to England after escaping a war. She said they never spoke about the past, and she had learned not to ask. They just wanted to survive, she said quietly. That was their story. I thought about Marta. about how silence can be protection, but also about how silence holds weight. Heavy, unspoken truths that want to breathe. After dinner, while walking home alone, I felt the air shift around me. Not cold, just clear, as if something had finally settled. Back in my flat, I stood in the hallway for a moment, listening. There was nothing unusual, but I smiled anyway, because I knew this space now. Every corner, every shadow, and even though one part of its story wasn't mine, I had helped carry it.